Hello everyone, how are you all doing today? My name is Deb Fallon and I'm here as a representative of the Beloit Public Library. I hope many of you have your library cards, and if you don't, you know that you'll be going to the library in May at the end of the school year, and if your parents complete the form, then you can get your own library card and use it over the summer. Now, I have 6 books here that I think are really good and that you will enjoy reading. The first one is Guts. Now, what's the word guts mean? Does anybody know? Okay, so I'm hoping then that you can discuss what guts are. And I'm thinking that most of you know that probably refers to your insides, okay, your intestines. But here in this book, guts have to do more with, I think, courage and bravery. You have the guts to do something. And Raina, the main character, who I think probably maybe has a little bit of resemblance to the author, whose name is also Raina, Telgemeier, because she had a hard time growing up in school, and this character has a hard time. She is always upset by something. Either it's something she ate, or it's the way she gets along with her friends, and so she has a rough time in school, but I think what you'll enjoy about it is that it is a graphic novel. And I think it's very fun to read. So here is Raina, and look at her shaking. So something's come up, and her mom seeks help for her, and eventually she works things out. She learns how to cope with the things that seem to bother her. So I think it's a good book and good lesson for all of us. So that is Guts. Now for the second book, I'd like you to please cover your ears, or actually shut your eyes first and then cover your ears. And I want you to stay like that for just about maybe 10-15 seconds. Okay, so what was that like? Well, if you didn't really hear anything, or if it was too quiet, or it was just strange not being able to see and hear at the same time, then you would have had something in common with Helen Keller, and I'm sure you've all heard of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was a normal toddler. When she was about 2 years old, she got very, very sick and had a very high fever, which she did eventually recover from. But when she recovered, she lost her hearing and her sight. Now, because she couldn't hear, what else probably is going to happen? Now, she couldn't see, she couldn't hear, so think about that. Right. She also could not talk. She was mute. And so, anyway, what you're going to read here is a story written basically with Helen's words, because it's I am Helen Keller. Now, she was kind of just a crazy little girl because she didn't understand what her parents were telling her. If they told her that she needed to sit down and eat at the table, she couldn't do it because she couldn't hear. And she didn't learn what things her parents were trying to tell her. And so they hired a teacher, Annie Sullivan, who actually spent her life with Helen Keller and taught Helen many, many things, and especially how to learn words, how to spell, and she learned how to read using, what language do people who are sightless use? Anybody know? And if you guessed Braille, you are correct. And Helen learned all of that. And eventually later in life, she even learned how to speak, because that's what she did. She spoke all over. And she graduated from college as well, all with the help of Annie Sullivan and, of course, her own perseverance. Now, one of the first ways that Helen Keller learned how to communicate was with the alphabet. Annie Sullivan taught her how to write the letters in her palm. And so she'd go A, and then they do the alphabet. And eventually then she would take those letters and she would make words out of them. And one of the first words that Helen Keller learned was water. So Annie Sullivan would, spell water in her hand. And then take her to the pump, because this was many years ago and they didn't have running water in the house. They had a water pump that they used outside. So she'd go out there and she'd start the pump going so that Annie could feel the water on her hand. Then she'd spell it again. And she did that with, many things. I think one of the second words was doll, and she gave Annie a little doll to hold. So what we're going to do right now is see if we can communicate in that same way that Helen Keller learned when she was a very young girl. And so, excuse me, you're going to find a partner and you're not going to move across the room. You're going to stay where you are and turn to the person closest to you. And perhaps your teacher can help you get organized. Then you're going to think of a word, probably very short word, maybe like an animal word, dog or cat, or book perhaps, something that you can hang on, it's tangible. Then what you're going to do is work with your partner whose eyes will be closed, and in the palm of his or her hand, you're going to write the letters to the word that you're thinking of. So let's say we use cat. You're going to write a big C, then an A, then a T. And then you give your partner, a chance to think about what that might be. And then he or she will do the same thing for you. Okay, any questions? Okay, so now we're going to take about 2 minutes, and your teacher will just stop this tape, and then you are going to practice with somebody. And if maybe it doesn't work out in class here today, go home and try it on one of your brothers or sisters, or your mom or grandma or grandpa. And just remember then that Helen Keller, who lived 80-some years, lived her whole life without being able to hear, see, nor really speak, although she did learn that later in life. So this is a great little book, I Am Helen Keller by Brad Meltzer. And by the way, is this fiction or nonfiction, do you think? Well, if you guessed nonfiction, you are correct. It is a story written more or less by Helen Keller. Okay, the next book now is called No Talking. How many of you are really competitive? Either playing sports or maybe playing word games. Well, this is a fun book by Andrew Clements. And it's about 5th graders. And they challenge one another. But it's the girls versus the gals. So, they decide that they are going to spend some time, I think about 2 weeks, not talking. And they eventually work out a system, and I think they can say 2 or 3 words at a time, but no more. Well, how do you think that works in a classroom? Their teachers didn't know what to do with them because they would quit talking except for these 2 or 3 words. Do you think you could do that in this classroom? Who talks the most, the girls or the guys? Well, maybe it's a good experiment. And to find out what happens, you have to read No Talking, a chapter book and a little longer one. And so for those of you who really enjoy reading, you'll have fun with No Talking, the boys versus the girls. Okay, let's go on. Everybody knows what this is, right? Yeah, Ladybug. And did you know that ladybugs were sent to space? Well, they were. And it all happened because of a girls' school in Santiago, Chile. You're going, Chile? What's Chile? Well, Chile is a country in South America. So let's look at the map here. We have where we are in North America. And this is in South America, a different continent, way south of us. So this happened there. And just a closer look of Chile. And here's Santiago, the capital of Chile. And that's where this girls' school is located. This is called Ladybug Launch. And it's a story about chinitas, who are ladybugs. And that's the word for ladybugs in Spanish in Chile. Now, if you have any connection to like Mexico or Central America, then you call them margaritas. There's a different name for them. So these little guys went into space because the girls in this school wanted to do an experiment. And they met one of the astronauts and decided that at some point, if people really do go into space, they're going to have to live on whatever they grow. Well, ladybugs are known for eating little insects, aphids, that like to live on plants and eat them. So they thought it'd be a great experiment to send these ladybugs to space to see what would happen if they were growing food in space. And they did so. And a couple girls got to talk to the people at NASA, and they went to Colorado, and you'll find that it's probably fairly easy reading, and a few Spanish words in here. So enjoy, but there's also a dictionary at the back for the Spanish words that are here. There you go. It's your little glossary. And then one of the women who's connected with it, which this happened back in the 90s, is now a doctor and lives in Santiago, Chile. So, a real story about chinitas, or ladybugs, that occurred in Santiago, Chile. Okay, the next one is Clubhouse Mysteries, and there's like a series of these. And are these fiction or nonfiction, do you think? Well, if you guessed fiction, you're correct. They're made-up stories. And this is about buried bones mystery. There are these four friends, Ziggy, Rashawn, Jerome, and Rico, who go to play basketball one day, and the basketball court has been ruined, destroyed. People cut down the baskets, and they tore up the asphalt. And so they had to find another way to spend their time during the summer. And they decided to build a little clubhouse. And then one of them brought a little treasure chest, so when they found things, they could put it in the treasure chest. And they did decide then to dig a hole to put this treasure chest in it for safekeeping, so nobody else would find it. Well, when they went digging the hole, they found a box of bones. Now, they didn't know were these bones for people or bones for a dog or a cat. They had no idea. So they had to get some help to figure all of that out. So that is the mystery of the book. So Clubhouse Mysteries, The Buried Bones. Okay, now the last book that I have is the heaviest one. When you get 6 or so of these in the backpack, It weighs a lot. But this is fascinating. It's called The Human Body. And you'll think that it's very fun to read because, look at this. There's not much reading and a lot of photographs. So let's see how you can do with some of these things. First of all, there's a part of your brain called the hippocampus, and it's located a little bit above your ear. Now, it's responsible for memory, but did you know that every time you memorize something, that it gets bigger? So what do you have to memorize in school that's really important? Yeah, math facts, right? So anyway, so that's a fun thing to remember. Remember, that it gets larger so you can memorize more. Now another thing is, we learned from the book, when a person tells a lie, his or her nose and the area around the nose and the eyes becomes warmer, which means then what probably happens to their skin? Well, depending on your complexion, what tone your skin is, it might get a little bit pinker or darker there in that area. So just remember that. But now we're going to try some trivia questions and see how you do. Okay, what's the strongest bone in your body? And then the teacher will hopefully give you all a chance to guess at that. And if you guessed jaw, you are correct. Mostly, what is your body made of? So hopefully you'll all get a chance to guess. And then for those of you who guessed water, you are on the spot. You are correct. Okay, what color eyes do most people have? Okay, well, it happens to be brown. So you're in the majority if you have brown eyes. Okay, now the next thing you need to do is either have a tape measure or a ruler. And your teacher can perhaps help out with this, or if you have a ruler in your desk, you can help each other. Okay, what you're going to do is measure the width of your arm span. And so what you're going to do is put out both arms, put them way out like this. And you're going to measure from the tip of your fingers to the tip of the fingers on your other hand. Once you've done that, that should be more or less the height that you are. Now, we're all growing a little differently now at this age, so it might be off a little bit. But once you've done that measuring this way, then you can measure the length and see how tall you all are. Another thing you can do with a tape measure is to measure your forearm. So maybe hold it here by your wrist, measure up to your elbow, and then take that length and measure your foot. They should be about the same. Okay, now, one more thing that we're going to do, and then you can quiz each other is, okay, what is the one food that most people are allergic to? Now, a lot of people are allergic to peanuts, but anybody have a guess of what might be the other food? Well, it's milk. If you haven't guessed, it's milk. So I think that's about it. Oh, how many bones do you have in your body? Okay, if you guessed 206, you are correct. Okay, so let's review these books. We have The Human Body, which is fiction or nonfiction? Well, obviously nonfiction, because hopefully these are all true facts. They're fun facts. Then we have The Clubhouse Mysteries about buried bones. So good luck with that one. And if you're interested in space and NASA, here you go, a story about ladybugs going to space. And then a little competition, no talking, where the girls versus the boys have this contest. So let's find out who talks the most. And then you can practice spelling words in the palms of your friends' hands to be like, I am Helen Keller. And then the graphic novel. I think you all like graphic novels, right? Well, this is Guts. Okay, enjoy reading.